Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the IMPC Friday morning seminar. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the Turrbal and Nagara people as traditional owners and custodians of the lands on which we meet today. We pay respect to their ancestors, past, present, elders, past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge their ongoing contribution to the Australian and global society. It's my great pleasure today to introduce our speaker, Dr. Drinkwater. Diane has worked in a variety of mining industry roles, being 40+ years in the industry, including mineral processing operations, engineering, research and consulting. Her principal interest is engineering education and technology expert, and she draws on her experience of developing and deliver targeted professional formation programs for early career professionals, which she's done so in industry and university alike in Australia, Africa, the Americas and Europe. She's chair of the AusIMM Metallurgical Society from 2012 to 2015, undertaken 2 terms as an AusIMM director and is a member of the International Mineral Processing Council, which probably makes the Education Commission. This morning, we'll be discussing the shortfalls in specialist education in metal extraction and mineral processing, highlighting the opportunities for value creation in these fields that stem from having a workforce with deep and specialised knowledge. The talk is entitled Securing the Future, Ensuring the Supply of Top Metallurgical Talent. Please join me in welcoming Diana.
Thanks, everyone, and it's always nice to be here in the JK. So I'm just checking the microphone and everything is working. Okay, so I'm talking, as you know, about ensuring a supply of top metallurgical talent. Some of you have heard me talk about similar topics before. And in fact, it's quite encouraging to see that there's quite a lot coming out in the, if you like, the non-mining press about the importance of the resources industry and the commodities generated by the resources industry. And what I'm really excited to see is that there seems to be some quite specific mention of the importance of mineral processing as a really critical link in the value chain. This is an editorial from the SME magazine, and if you have a look at the 4th paragraph down in that 2nd section, headed "It's the Processing Stupid," the significance of mineral processing cannot be overstated. While mining often captures the spotlight, we all know that, they're all show ponies, we prioritise, it's the processing stage that unlocks the true economic benefits and transforms raw materials into valuable products. And there's lots of other documents saying the same kinds of thing. The Commonwealth, an Australian group put out a Commonwealth Critical Minerals Strategy, which also has this statement in it: more skilled process engineers are needed. More skilled process engineers are needed, which is great to see. But for some in this room and in the audience, it does leave us feeling a little bit miffed, because it brings to mind the analogy of being mugged by a tortoise. I don't know if any of you are aware, but you can be mugged by a tortoise. The thing is, you have to be looking in the wrong direction for a very, very long time. Many people in our industry are aware that in 1998, a document was put together called Back from the Brink, talking about the challenge in all professions, I guess, related to the mining industry. So metallurgy, mineral processing, geology, and mining engineering. And if you read, I'm not going to read it out to you, and some of you probably know this document anyway. There are a number of things that have been stated in that document that still apply today, despite all the efforts that we've gone to. So some of us are very aware of the issues that we're up against. And in fact, things haven't changed in some ways all that much. And yet there are people in this room who probably weren't born in 1998. So it's been a long time that we've been talking about this issue. I'll let these people sit. But some things have changed since 1998. And perhaps the reason we've got away with not doing as much as maybe could have been done is because for the last 20, 30 years, the Australian mining industry has been focused on iron ore, coal, aluminium maybe, but some of these commodities that are fairly straightforward, at least from a mineral processing point of view. There's an awful lot of dig it up and put it on a ship stuff in there. That's all changing, as we all know, and I don't need to tell you about all the excitement about critical minerals. This diagram on the slide here just shows the world demand for critical minerals based on some of the different scenarios that have been put forward about the future. So the stated policies, which is, if you like, the most conservative of the scenarios, is the smallest one, but then you've got the requirements if we want to achieve net zero emissions by 2050, and they're even much more significant. So things have changed, and the sorts of commodities that the industry needs to be generating have changed. So this business, more skilled process engineers are needed due to the complexity of the extraction, et cetera, applies in a way that it didn't 20 or 30 years ago. So that makes the problem even more pressing, because in the last 30 years, despite the efforts, and there were some really good efforts generated in the follow-up to the Back from the Brink report. Despite all of that, we are still in a worse position as far as producing mineral processors and metallurgists than we were 30 years ago. So this complexity of extraction relates to a whole lot of things. We're dealing, particularly with some of the rare earths and the critical minerals, with some very, very low head grades. That means massive quantities of material needs to be treated to extract what we need. Product quality requirements for battery minerals are very, very tight compared to iron ore, where as long as it's kind of near enough, it goes onto a ship and everybody's reasonably happy. If you're selling lithium to a battery producer and it doesn't meet spec, then you don't have a sale. And the same applies for a lot of these other very high value commodities. And then the mineralogy is really complicated with many of these. So all of those things require significant metallurgical smarts, if you like. So we need metallurgists. We need to make the most of our mineral processing and mining operations, in fact, our extraction operations. And we need more effective performance, we need efficient operation, and we need higher level, or the highest possible levels of extraction. And in order to achieve that, there are a whole lot of things that metallurgists need to have. Core technical skills. They need to understand the processes they're dealing with and the machines that they're using, or the equipment and the systems that they're using. They need to have good foundational scientific knowledge. They need to know best practice. Again, you think that's trivial, but it's surprising when you go out into industry. And I think those of you in the consulting side of things are probably seeing this more than most, that some people have no idea how a good plant works. All they know is how their plant works. You need to know how to collect and manage data, and you need to have good decision-making tools and resources. And none of that stuff comes from nowhere. All of that has to be taught and practiced. And as an example of the benefits of having smart people making good decisions, we can look at a couple of situations here. And in fact, this is another issue that we're often up against. It's very easy to demonstrate the benefits of cost savings. You know, if your manager comes to you and says, the process plant needs to make a bigger profit, you know, we're just not quite meeting our targets. It's very easy to say, okay, I'll spend less. And then obviously, because your revenue is what you spent against what you generate, you're going to get a certain amount. And there's an example here for a porphyry copper mine, very large tonnage, low percentage. If you can reduce your costs by 1%, you can save $2.7 million per annum. And that's pretty impressive, and you'll get a pat on the back from your manager for doing that. Because of that, we tend to focus on those sorts of things because we know in advance what the result's going to be. If, however, you can improve your process recovery from 88% to 89%, we've run the numbers on this little example, you can improve your revenue generation by $14 million. So an order of magnitude better performance. The challenge, though, is that it's hard to convince someone that you're going to achieve that outcome. You might go to them with a proposal for a process improvement strategy, And you can make predictions about what it's going to achieve, but it may not be believed. It may not be, nobody might be prepared to spend the little bit of money that it might cost to make that difference. So a lot of opportunities are being missed. A colleague of mine has given me some numbers on real value generation by doing smart things in mineral processing plants. So maintaining the improvement in throughput using advanced or fully automated process control as the System Champion moves on. That was worth 6% throughput in an operation. And again, you can run the numbers on what that means in dollars. Interestingly, the issue there is that the improvement's been made. Somebody's come in, made a change to the operation, and the plant is running better. But as you're all aware, if the champion of that improvement then leaves, it's very rare for the benefits to stay. So you need to have your smart people on site, or at least connected with the site, making the difference. So 6% increased throughput. Another example with froth vision control, 2% better recovery. And again, improvements in recovery are usually very, very beneficial in terms of generated revenue. And this is another factor that we're up against in the training world, though. It sort of highlights the fact that these big benefits come from automation, from automatic systems. So one of the other things that we find in trying to convince people that they need better trained people is that there's an expectation in some parts of our industry that you can run your operation with no people in there at all, that the robots are going to come and do the work for us, that we've got automation that will just do much better than human beings. So I want to address that issue for a moment as well, because it is a really significant one. And this is from a quite old report now about the importance of having human beings in engineering operations. And as you can see, the first line there, on the basis of current technology, and all right, 10 years ago, but things haven't changed that much, the probability that engineering positions will be automated is less than 15%. What it's really highlighting is the importance of what engineers do. You know, we spend a lot of time at dinner parties, I'm sure, being told by other people that we're not creative, that creatives are somehow a special group of people that work in the arts. But engineers do an awful lot of creative thinking, and they use a lot of imagination. So in fact, a study was done by McKinsey, again, this is 2018 study, about different professions and how much threat there is of those professions being fully automated. And they broke everything up into these 5 factors, addressing the feasibility of replacing them, the cost of replacing them, the benefits of replacing them. And as you can see, there's a sort of shadow of the picture, but this is the close-up of the assessment they made of the needs, the different things that go on in the mining sector. So you can see this here, it says mining. Very, very low numbers in terms of the ability of what we do that can be automated, because so much of what we do is employing our human decision-making, creativity, you know, sort of understanding nuance. And as you can see, dealing with unpredictable events. So we're much, much safer than the accountants and the lawyers and the people who do massive amounts of very predictable work. So for that reason, we do need mineral processors to go into the critical minerals boom, or whatever it is that's waiting for us for the 21st century. I didn't know Peter was coming today, but I've got a couple of definitions of what mineral processing is. One of them generated by Peter. Another one came out of some work that was done in the IMPC. Because obviously, if we need to be delivering people with metallurgical skill set, we need to understand something about what that skill set requires. So the IMPC definition tells us a bit about what we do. We liberate, we concentrate desirable minerals in a responsible way so that they can be, you know, if you like, passed on to the next step of the value chain. Peter's definition goes into a little more detail about the things that we need to be able to do. So we're characterised by application of process knowledge, control and reaction engineering, innovative thinking, and then lots and lots of numerical modelling and so on. underpinned by really strong foundations in physics, chemistry, and the basic sciences. Something else about mineral processing education that is missing, and forgive me, all the chemical engineers in the audience, missing, if you like, by a lot of other process engineers, is that mineral processors are taught to think about separation as a topic in itself. And anybody who used the old Kelly and Spottiswoode textbook would be familiar with this diagram of a generalized separator. So we take a step back from saying, I'm an expert in flotation, or I'm an expert in mag separation or heavy medium separation. And we say we're experts in separation. And we actually look at the separation task that's to be done. And first of all, we evaluate all the options that we have, and then we decide what process we're going to use. And only after that do we employ a deep knowledge of that process. And that's something that I think is being lost in a lot of process engineering applications, where we forget to think about separation in itself as a discipline. Okay, so I'm going to talk a bit about mineral processing and what we know about the skills that are needed and so on. And just as background, a lot of this comes from work that's been done by the International Mineral Processing Council, the IMPC, who's been running an education commission. And as you heard in the introduction, I've been involved with that for a number of years. It doesn't do a lot, but one of the things it does do is that it pulls together a group of people that are interested in education and, if you like, picks their minds. So there've been a number of publications put out over the years that come out of seminars and conferences that have been held. There's a conference, an IMPC conference coming up this year in Washington, and we're going to be running an education symposium there. And the issues that are important to us are discussed by a group of like-minded people there. The most recent document that came out of that was 2017, when we pulled together a whole lot of content that came out of a symposium in Quebec City in 2016. And one of the things we did was that we drew up a roadmap for mineral processing education, trying to sort of filter out the most important aspects and also the commonalities, because we are dealing with a very diverse global environment producing people that have the skills to work in our industry. So these are just examples of some of the things that are in this ebook. You can find it online on the IMPC website. And we address a whole lot of issues in quite a bit of detail there. But there are some really key findings that came out of it. First of all, there's considerable variety in the mineral processing, if you like, undergraduate programs or foundational programs that are being delivered around the world. Now, that's not the end of the world, and I'll talk a bit more about that later on. But we do need to acknowledge, we certainly need to be aware that mineral processors and metallurgists coming out of Chile will be different to those coming out of Australia, different again to those coming out of India. However, the fundamental topics that people need to know about are pretty standard, and that's well understood, and there was lots and lots of support for that. Ongoing skills development, and this is the bit that's really behind what I'm talking about today. It's the ongoing skills development that is I think the area where there's the most need for action, and it's ad hoc at the moment in many cases. There are some exceptions, and I don't want to suggest that everybody's doing this badly, but there's not the same sort of system that was in place when I graduated many, many years ago to ensure that graduates are exposed to a whole range of, important developmental experiences. The other thing that came out, and again, no surprise to the audience here, is that industry-university partnerships are important, or in other words, ongoing communication between the users of mineral processing technology and the developers and the inventors of new processes and new ways of doing things. And again, that's a really critical thing that needs to be nurtured and looked after. We also got some input into what it is that a mineral processor needs to be able to do and what they need to know. And you can see there's a whole lot of stuff here. So they need to know, you know, understandings of rocks and minerals, geology, mineralogy. They need to know something about how rocks break, but they also need to know the properties of the commodities that they're dealing with as minerals. They need to know how to characterize the things that are important for process design. And then they need a whole lot of general skills, as I said before, the ability to collect and manage data, numerical modeling skills, and so on. All of that has to come together. Now, it's not like one mineral processing engineer in a porphyry copper operation in Chile is going to need the same knowledge of characterization tools or whatever as somebody else working in Australia in a gold mine. There are going to be enormous differences. And this is one of the problems that we have as a discipline in trying to have some sort of coordinated strategy in people development, professional development, because there is just so much diversity in the sorts of processes that we're dealing with, in the underpinning mineralogy and chemistry and physics knowledge, hydrodynamics knowledge you have to understand your processes. And when things get hard, they often just get overlooked and ignored. And that is one of the reasons I think that we struggle a bit to have a really coordinated approach as a discipline to developing our people. There are a number of themes that came out of the study, and I'll just let you quickly read that, and I'll go into a bit more detail on some of the issues there. The diversity around the world is an interesting thing, and as I said, it's not a problem in itself, but it needs to be understood that graduates coming from different parts of the world are coming with different skill sets. So we collected information from all of these countries here in the 2016 IMPC study. And as I said, there's some commonalities, but there's some significant differences. One of the key differences we see is that in places like Australia, South Africa, and Europe, the mineral processing graduates are coming out with a very strong process engineering focus. We employ huge numbers of chemical engineers as mineral processors, and in many operations, they're seen as interchangeable. And that's, again, not a problem, but it's worth knowing because there are some things that chemical engineers don't get in their standard undergraduate degrees. They don't understand, they don't usually learn very much about how rocks break. They often know nothing about mineralogy. They think they're treating copper, whereas the reality is they might be treating chalcocite or chalcopyrite or something. So there's certain things, and they also don't know a lot about dealing with particulates because a lot of their process management software is designed for homogeneous streams, and we don't have homogeneous streams of slurry coming out of ball mills. So there are different skills that they need to learn. Now, there's many chemical engineers in this room, I know, and most of them have jumped that hurdle quite effectively and learnt the skills that they need, but it is an important hurdle for people to be able to jump. Then there are other places where there is still very strong focus on mineral processing and, in fact, very close links between mineral processing degrees, mining engineering, and geology. So those graduates come out with a really good understanding of the mining industry and how it works. So there are some regional differences because of that. One of the other issues we're up against is the fact that our industry is cyclical. Some of us have been around long enough to see at least 2 or 3 boom bust cycles, and you know, we don't pretend there won't be more. But the real challenge for delivery of training and education is that whenever we get a bust, we lose things. We lose university departments, we lose short course providers, we lose all kinds of resources that are used in the training and development of people. And this little graph here was put together by the Minerals Council, just showing the pattern of first year enrolments and the numbers here are the 2016 intake, and some of you will know that's the year the bottom really fell out of mining engineering departments. So University of New South Wales had 11 mining engineers in 2016. I was teaching there in about 2008 or 9 to classes of 200 mining engineers. So that's the sort of cycles we're up against. And look, you can't blame universities for reacting to those sorts of challenges, but it does mean that we have issues that carry on into the next boom cycle because we stopped training people during the bust. The IMPC work also gave people the opportunity to just comment. We had a fairly significant survey with about 90 respondents who sent us their views about what they were teaching, what they were seeing. We had industry people talking about what they wanted in employees. And then we had space for free comment. And this is one of the comments we got. And I put it up here because I hear people say this sort of thing all the time. Those of us in the tent hear this kind of thing all the time. And this particularly the issue, and this is word for word from one of our comments, rediscovery characterised by repeats of past mistakes and rehash of old research as new. It is a real problem in our industry because we've lost knowledge that we had 20, 30 years ago. And again, it's a logical response to the situation that we've been through for the last few decades. And the last thing I want to be doing is dumping on universities, because universities are not in an enviable position. You know, as business units, they've got to survive, and the only way they can survive is to generate revenue. So metallurgy programs in universities around the world, this is not an Australian problem, are under threat because of the small numbers. And again, because a couple of years of very small numbers and they're gone. But they also have problems that they have always had with being absolutely up to date with what's going on in industry. Now that shouldn't matter, because industry shouldn't expect to receive fully formed graduates out of university. There should be an expectation that universities are one kind of institution, but what they're not is, if you like, on-the-job training environments. If people need to understand the on-the-job aspects, or if you like, the really practical applications of what they're learning, they can only learn that in the workplace, and employers need to have some sort of input into that. And the salary difference, the fact that researchers are researchers, they're not being paid the same sort of money that they'd get in industry. They tend to have narrow focus because of the research that they do, which means there are some courses being taught extremely well. But that doesn't mean that all the courses are being taught very well, because departments aren't big enough to have experts in everything. None of that should be a problem if there are ways of dealing with that, and if training and education allows you to sort of make up for shortfalls. So, you know, at the end of the day, universities can't fix the problem, and they shouldn't be expected to fix the problem. They're only a part of developing the expertise that people need. So let's talk about how you become a mineral processing expert. I mean, it's fairly clear from what I've said so far that I certainly don't expect mineral processing experts to be generated as they graduate from university. It's a much longer journey from that. So I want to talk about a couple of steps in that journey. It takes time. To really become an expert, you need to do a whole lot of things in different areas, and through that process, obviously be open to learning, be exposed to the right sort of influences, and then learn, observe, practice, and reflect. You know, those of you that have done anything in the education sphere will know the adult education cycle, where you learn by doing, looking at what's happened, making a decision about what you saw, and then going back and doing it again. So you need to be allowed to try things. You need to be able to make mistakes and learn from your mistakes. And at the end of the day, that's how you get to be an expert. Different stages, you have very different needs. So the first person on the journey that I'm putting up here is, if you like, your brand new university graduate, the proto-professional, we can call them. So they've been told by their university that they've got the best degree that money can buy, and go out there and knock them dead, you know. But at the end of the day, they know, and everyone around them also knows, that they don't really know much. But they can't let people know that. So they spend an awful lot of their time trying to make sure that people don't realise how little they know. And at the same time, if they're good, madly trying to gather as much information as they can. So the sort of learning experiences that people at this stage of their career development need are quite unique. In fact, they're actually very good candidates for structured classroom type learning. So, you know, when companies put on summer schools or short courses or whatever, these kinds of people often do very well out of it, unless they're so terrified of letting people know how little they know that they refuse to learn. And there's always one or two of those. But on the whole, most people get an awful lot out of that. They're very, very keen to get an opportunity to try things out, and they really need to be allowed to do that, to have a bit of freedom, to make their mark, to make mistakes in a supported, nurtured way so that they can learn from those mistakes and the mind's going to keep running. You know, we don't want to let people have open slather. I have a colleague in the medical industry who calls this the whites of the eyes stage of development, because if you're in the medical industry, the thing that's really driving you is, please don't let me kill someone, you know, where at least here it's, please don't let me, you know, break the ball mill or whatever it is. One way or another, though, there's still an awful lot of concern and anxiety related to their development needs. A little further along the way, we've got what the literature likes to refer to as the journeyman. I'm still trying to find a better word for that. Certainly we need to have a gender neutral word for it. But we all recognise this person, and some of these people are fabulous. I mean, most of these people are fabulous. If they've survived long enough, they're really starting to have a significant impact on their workplaces. They're very, very busy. They're generally the busiest people on site because they've got to manage up. Now they're in a position where they're responsible for areas and they've got to manage up. They've also got to manage down, and that keeps them very, very busy. They're usually the go-to person when things need to be done. So they still have learning needs, but they're quite different from the learning needs of the proto-professional and also people later on. And it's much, much harder you certainly won't get them into a classroom situation very often because they're far too busy and they don't want their time wasted, and with very good reason. However, a good development program addresses the needs of these people just as well as it addresses the needs of the proto-professional. And in fact, coaching and mentoring can have a really significant impact on the development of these people, as long as there's a good connection, and the connection also needs to be one where the older person, or the more senior person, they don't have to be older, feels that they're not wasting their time. That's a really significant thing because time is precious for these people. And the young one has to feel supported, because at the end of the day, the proto-professional needs the freedom to try things out, but the support to make mistakes and not be, you know, punished too severely for them. Organisations look at this as well. And in fact, if you look at this from an organisational point of view, and there's lots of models of this, I've just chosen one particular one, nice and simple. You go through these various stages. So you've got Luke Skywalker, the younger, at the beginning there, contributing, but with a lot of dependence on other people. Moving through to young Obi-Wan, who's independently contributing, but still got a bit to learn. And then ultimately we want to head all the way up to becoming a master. Now the stage 2 person contributing independently is doing a great job, as I said, the busiest person on site. The next step for them is to be contributing through the use and the needs and the work of others. So that means leading teams effectively, leading really productive teams. So the mentoring bit, oh, sorry, yes, I threw this slide in as an afterthought, because so many organisations think that they can skip the first part and just employ people to do the really smart stuff. And so I forgot I'd put that in there. I should have said something more about that. But I do want to make that point, and that's why I'm pausing for a moment to make that point, that you can't get away from this as an industry. And all right, you might be able to get away with it as a company if you can employ people that have got all the skills that you need and they come in and they start performing, fabulous. But if everybody does that, we suddenly fall off a cliff because nobody knows anything. You know, we lose everyone. So getting back to the development, if you like, of the people, the journeymen, the journeywomen, the people on the way through their careers. Coaching relationships can help them enormously as well. So including them in your development of young people is really valuable, not just for the young people being developed, who get the benefits of, if you like, the nuanced thinking that the coach is able to bring, but it's also beneficial for the coach because it's preparing them for that stage in their career when they're going to be sitting in a nice comfy office telling other people what to do. So it is worth investing in education. It's really important to have people who know what they're doing, making the right decisions. They'll make sound technical decisions based on best practice. They'll feel challenged, they'll feel rewarded. And I don't want to skip over that word challenged, because when you think about what draws people into engineering programs, it's not that they think they're going to have a cushy job and not have to do anything difficult in their whole lives. They're generally drawn into engineering because they're looking for something exciting and challenging with opportunities for them to really make an impact, a creative impact. I'm using that word creative again. They obviously need to have really sound fundamental skills to be able to achieve that outcome. And if they do, and if you've got teams of people with that skill set, then you're much more likely to get really good innovative outcomes from the industry. And on the flip side, if you do nothing, well, we go back to that comment that it sticks in my mind, you know, that we're just going to be in this endless rehash of people discovering stuff all over again that we've known for 30 or 40 years. We really want to be building on what we've got. We want our operations to be running as effectively as they can be. And I just want to scare you a little bit more by talking about some of the other places we really need metallurgical skills and some of the other ways. So if you're running an operation, 30 years ago, if you were running an operation in Africa, in Southeast Asia, whatever, you would often package stuff up and send it off to a laboratory in Australia, in the US, whatever, to get things done. You know, those days are no longer with us. We now need to do a lot of our support, mining support, technical work in country, wherever it is that we're operating. What that means is that we need the institutions in those countries to be operating as well as ALS Perth or whatever the laboratory of choice is in, if you like, first world countries. So the need for skills development goes way beyond just the need for employing, you know, people coming out of the University of Queensland or UBC. And in fact, I think I don't have to tell this group about the fact that there are quotas now in the industry across all aspects, the mining sector and the met sector. So whatever we come up with to develop mineral processing skills and knowledge has to be available to people in all parts of the world. And this business of preserving a knowledge base, which I've mentioned a couple of times, is really important. So I've said several times, this is not an easy thing to do. There are many, many challenges. And again, I'm not the only person looking at this issue and the challenges that it faces. So a report was produced in 2018, so it's getting a bit old as well, The Future of Higher Education in Mining, which was an Australian-based study, looking at the challenges that mining and minerals industry education is facing, the reasons we have so much trouble. And they summarised the challenge that we're up against with 3 main dot points: that you're dealing with the needs of a rapidly changing industry. And I don't think I have to tell you what sort of changes we're seeing: technological change, cultural change, you know, changes in, if you like, world geography and geopolitics. All of those things impact on the sorts of things that people need to be able to do when they're working in the industry. You're dealing with graduates produced by an increasingly competitive and complex education system, which again is changing just as fast as the industry. And for me, not being directly involved in the university system anymore, I constantly find myself surprised by things that have happened in undergraduate education, and it's going on all around the world. As I say, this is not just an Australian issue. And then, of course, the expectations of the young people coming out of different parts of the world are different. They're different from one another, and they're different from what they were 30, 40, 50 years ago. And education providers need to be aware of that and need to be able to work with that. So we don't have a crystal ball in terms of trying to work out what the future education needs and requirements are. But there are some things we can do to try and be smart about what we're teaching people. So we know we can't say with any certainty what commodities will be in vogue in 20, well, when I say in high demand in 20 years' time. But we can make a bit of a guess. And these are a list of questions that we can ask ourselves if we're thinking about how to keep our content current and relevant. And I think everyone here could probably make a fairly good guess of what technologies we're likely to see more of and what we're likely to see less of. What are the skills that you think are declining in terms of their importance, and what are the ones that are becoming more and more important? I mean, just think of the importance of being able to run with advanced modelling systems and advanced process control systems, and the skills that a person running an operation dependent on those systems needs to have. So they're the sorts of things that we can be asking ourselves when we're trying to keep our education systems, and when I say that, I mean broadly across all aspects of career development. In order to keep them current, we need to be thinking about these things. I don't know how many of you have seen a recent announcement from the US that there's government money. It's not a massive amount of government money, I must say, but at least it's money from the government, which means it doesn't have to be individually raised, fed into American mining schools. In response to a paper that was written, I think 2022, something was put together and submitted to the US government, pointing out the sorts of things I'm talking about here. The need for smart people in the minerals industry in order to achieve the outcomes that we want from that industry, and the fact that it's really, really difficult to produce those people at the moment. So the Americans have done something about it. It's a step in the right direction. We don't have anything quite like that here in Australia at the moment, but we do have a lot of people. For example, the AusIMM is writing submissions. A number of other stakeholders are actively lobbying government about the need. But at this stage, although there's stuff about what's important and what's needed, we don't yet have a coordinated strategy. So all I can say is that we just need to keep pushing, and there need to be a lot of options. And as some of you know, I'm currently involved with a program called Metcelerate, which is an early career on the job, if you like, structured training program for metallurgists. And I'd love to plug that, but Metcelerate is only one very small part of what we need to solve this problem. So we're doing our bit by filling a gap that we've seen, but there are an enormous number of gaps out there. You know, I'm mindful of people sticking fingers in dikes. You know, we're not going to be able to keep Holland safe by ourselves. There needs to be a whole lot done. So we've got to focus on the quality of undergraduate training, making sure that the foundational knowledge that people are getting is going to be adequate to equip them for their journey. We've got to have still going to be a need for ad hoc short courses and things like that, so that people can get what they need where they need it. The research sector needs to be supported, and it needs to be healthy, and it needs to be doing well and have smart people attracted to coming and joining it if we want to get the right sort of outcomes from that. So a whole lot of things need to be done. It's a puzzle, it's a jigsaw, and every single piece of that jigsaw is important. The big question, and a part of the reason that we're still talking about all these years later, from the 1998 onwards, who's going to pay for all of this, you know? And at the end of the day, we pay for it. We as a country, as a global community, we pay for what we do and don't get out of this. And there is certainly a very good argument that centralised governments could make a really big impact in at least channeling funds where they're needed. But I'm not sure what the chances are of getting a coordinated national strategy, let alone a coordinated general strategy. So I guess that's, as I'm wrapping this up, because I'm not going to come up with any great solutions, sadly, to this issue. I really just want to highlight the problem. Individual stakeholder groups have to just keep banging away. You know, we've built a program and we think that's got a place, but we also want to see other programs going. We want to see career development done well, so that the right, smart, intelligent, imaginative, driven people stay in the industry rather than getting disillusioned and taking their skills elsewhere. So there needs to be a whole lot of stuff happening to keep us, to bring us back to where we'd really like to be in the educational space. So in conclusion, mineral processing is important. We really do. I think I speak for everyone in this room, even the geologists in the room. We as a discipline and all the associated disciplines make a big difference to how effective and efficient mineral resource development is. You need good foundational degrees and you need ongoing education in the workplace so that you can build up that skill set you need to become a master and eventually even, you know, we've got some Yodas out there somewhere, I'm sure. It costs money to do it. It isn't cheap. You know, I talked about Metcelerate. The only reason Metcelerate exists is that we attracted funding. Somebody paid for our time to sit down for 12 months and build a program. It doesn't happen if you just tell people to build a program on Tuesday afternoons when they've got some spare time from their real job. And so somebody has got to bite the bullet and pay for that sort of thing. But the benefits will outweigh the costs. We always have this struggle in training of convincing people that it's worth parting with $20,000, $30,000, when they'll spend a huge amount of money on equipment for the mining industry, process control systems for the mining industry. But somehow if it's training, it's too hard to demonstrate the value, so they don't spend it. It's a complex problem, but it's not a wicked problem. It's not so difficult that it's really, really hard to find solutions. The solutions are pretty straightforward, and in 1998, we had a pretty fair idea of what they were. So the challenge we have is not to define the problem. We know what it is. It's to then move on to the next stage of starting to put systems in place to address it. So thank you. I'm sure people will have questions and comments about what I've said today, so I'm happy to open the floor. Thanks.
Thanks very much for that, Dinah. That was fascinating and wonderful use of Star Wars media. Great to see. I'm sure we've got lots of questions from the floor here, but the first question we'll take is from online, from Ian Satchwell. Ian asks, Chinese metallurgists and technicians were recently required to get a China-designed lithium dioxide plant in Western Australia working properly. And China has banned the export of rare earth extraction technology. How difficult is it going to be for Australia to become self-sufficient in technology and skills in these new metallurgical fields? So just a small question.
And look, I guess that speaks to one of the points I made. It's going to be difficult, but we know about how to do these things. We have to go through a number of processes in Australia, I guess, to get operations up and to get the skills that are needed. Chinese have the benefit of a strong centralised government to pull that sort of stuff together more regularly. So it would be difficult, but not impossible to do, absolutely.
Just remind the folks online, if you do have a question, you can raise your hand in the chat and ask it live, or just type it into the Q&A box. Do we have any questions from the floor?
Thanks, Dinah. It is, yeah. Yes, it is. Thanks, Dinah. That was fantastic. I really enjoyed that. I have so many different things, but one thing I did want to point out, there was I think on page 1, you know, around just before 30, you said 5 things about universities and 4 of them don't apply to UQ. So you were saying, oh, that universities don't really have enough metallurgists anymore. We have 80 metallurgical specialists in our university, and we don't provide specialist metallurgical. We do, and we have plenty of access to mine sites. And all those 80 people, or most of those 80 people, aren't here because they're unable to get industry salaries. It's because they're doing passion jobs and they're happy places in a university, trying to push the boundaries of metallurgical knowledge and skill. And then, and certainly, our metallurgists have plenty of industrial experience. So I'm not saying I disagree with you overall, but I think including that as a, you know, potentially a justification for students to not go to universities for the upskilling that they need is probably a.
Yeah, and look, this came out of the study where we surveyed people about issues. So it came out of a summary of feedback that we got in answer to our questions about universities. And look, I agree, there are probably a couple of universities that fit that same criteria of being well connected with industry. So there are issues, but I guess across the board, across the industry in general, we still have these issues where people don't have good access to industry and don't have, so they might be learning, and that, as I said, also, it shouldn't be a problem if they don't, as long as there are opportunities for them when they do graduate to get that experience. Certainly field trips, you know, one of the things that were being done a dime a dozen when I was an undergraduate and graduate, you see far, far fewer of than you used to. So there aren't too many UQ graduates that have seen a mine site compared to those of us 30, 40, however many years ago.
If you check LinkedIn, our Met students actually just completed a trip to Canada, looking at mine sites all over the place there. And last year they went to Chile. So anyway, but I don't disagree with anything you're saying in more in a general way, but I just wanted to make sure that to the assembled audience that that there was an understanding that a lot of these statements didn't necessarily apply to us. But my question actually was more around the sort of parallel to the sort of progression that you showed in the specialization area when you were going through that. And I thought it was a really great way to put it, was the requirements for the other things that professionals in those areas need, in addition to the technical, that are probably more complex as well, both around how to manage teams and negotiate those sorts of realities, as well as the whole sustainability side of things. And have the work that you've been doing kind of taken, or you know, in these various different groups, taken that into account as well?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because it is being done, and that's the stuff that most large organizations actually do well. Certainly that's something we've seen much big improvements. So I guess my personal frame of reference is the last 30 or 40 years, and it's being done much better now than it was. And in fact, we have to be careful, those of us working in the education and training, you know, postgraduate or professional development space, that we're not being seen as trying to tread on the toes of the people within companies who are developing the leadership, the teamwork, the management skills. They're critically important, I agree. We leave them out because we know that they're being addressed by companies. The one problem I have with it is that a lot of human resources managers think that's all an engineer needs. They think they've got all the engineering they need from their undergraduate degree, and all they need now is the leadership and the teamwork and the management. And yet, if you said to a senior human resources professional, did you know everything there was to know about human resources when you graduated? Of course they'd say no, but they somehow have this idea that engineering is just a chunk of knowledge you get in your head as an undergraduate, and you just carry that with you through the rest of your career. Whereas there's so much more, and geology similarly, you know, any of the technical skills, and it's a changing environment. But absolutely, that stuff is important. I don't want to come across as sounding like I don't value it. It's just that we're looking for gaps, and the gap is the technical skills development.
So one thing you showed on that, on some of those graphs, were the first year intake numbers.
Yeah.
Now, in a way, I would argue that the people at university actually provide the excitement once they're already here. So I would ask you, what would you think about how we actually get to the year 10, year 12 people to encourage them the excitement of what they're about to face up to when they get here and actually enroll for engineering?
And again, that is a really important aspect. The one comment I'd make about that is that we did a study once on skills gaps, and we looked at the issue that you're talking about. When we go to workshops discussing skills in the industry, we frequently, if you like, go down that rabbit hole and never come out. And we did a count, there were 278 individual programs in Australia looking at encouraging kids to come into mining related careers out of high schools. But we couldn't find any that were encouraged them once they were there in developing into, you know, people that could genuinely apply their expertise in practice, which is ultimately what we want. So again, it's about identifying the gaps and sort of focusing on those gaps. But I don't want to sound like I think it doesn't matter. I just know there are a lot of people already looking at probably better than me at that kind of thing. It's a challenge, and as we all know, because we probably all sat in those workshops where we list out all the reasons people don't want to do mining related degrees, you know, there's a whole lot of cultural stuff we've got to break down to do that.
I got a question. One of the key barriers to providing on-the-job training, I think, for companies has always been high staff turnover and the risk of investing in staff and then just having them leave and take that expertise elsewhere. And that, you know, I've worked for, I don't know, 10 companies in 10 years, more or less, over the last 10 years. And my grandfather worked in the mining industry. He worked for the same company when he came back from World War II to the time he retired. Do you think there is something in that change in the way that we work, and what can we do about that to increase technology transfer and education in the sector?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it comes up again and again when we're talking to people about training. You know, I think one thing we can say is that we're not going to go back to those pre-war years where people stayed with one company for 30 years or whatever, 40 years. Some people, yes, here and there, but it's really rare to see. So that's my comment, that we can't really change that. What we have to do is deal with the new normal, which is that people change jobs all the time. And I'll just tell a story from, again, the Metcelerate program development, which we got up because of sponsorship from 3 mining companies, Freeport, McMoran, Newmont and Teck at the time. Sat around a table saying, what do we want to see in a program? Worked it out with the users, the potential users. And this issue came up. How are we going to sell this within our organisations? Because they're going to say exactly what you said, that people will just get skilled up and leave. At some point, you've got to rely on altruism. You know, the resolution of the conversation in that room around that table was, well, if we don't do this, we're not going to have anyone who knows anything. And all right, if someone from my company leaves and joins your company, at least you'll know that they're coming across with the, you know, the skill set that we've developed. So I guess my answer to that is, if you're really going to be hard and commercial, it's a very hard sell. But if you take a step back to thinking about what's good for us as an industry, and really how big an investment are we talking about? As I said, we're not talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're talking about a few tens of thousands of dollars generally with training. And all right, not all of that comes home to roost, but the industry as a whole will benefit from that. So we kind of have to rely on people to want to do what's right for the industry. And I know that's not a very safe way to go forward, but it's the only hope we've got.
Do you see it more being funded by collections of companies then, or by central governments funding things, or by the individual upskilling themselves, or some combination of the above?
Yeah, I'd love to say central funding, but how many years have we been telling governments we want central funding? And I think we can say after, you know, after all that time, the 1998 back from the Brink report generated some substantial government funding, which I must say, you know, has benefited people like myself. This is how I got involved in the training space out of the funding that was made available for people there. Peter, I know, had a lot to do with that, and others. That helped. But again, it didn't solve the problem by itself. I think what we really need is lots of individuals each doing their piece. I guess what I'm trying to say is what we need is for the industry as a whole to recognise the importance of this and do what they can to ensure that we're keeping skills current and relevant and all that sort of thing, meeting the needs.
Wonderful, thank you. Next question.
Thanks, Diana. Peter Hayes. Just going back to one of the points that you made, I think one of the key steps is for the people who make decisions about expenditure of money is regarding education and skills development as an investment rather than a cost. And if you get leaders of those companies deciding that it's for the benefit, the long-term benefit of their company to make that investment, and there is a payback at the end of the day, albeit long-term, that's the way to unleash or release some of those things. You mentioned that the American government has finally woken up to the fact that they've shut down the industry for the last 40 years and they actually need that stuff. And maybe that will resonate around the rest of the industry, that they realise that they need these skills development to address the challenges of the future. As you said, we're moving into uncharted waters in many cases. And I think for rounded education is important. Not only you're talking about mineral processing in terms of physical separations,
Yeah.
but as we go to lower grades, then somebody needs to know something about hydrometallurgy and leaching and those sorts of integrating those into the value chain as well. So I think you've got to start at the top. Somebody has to convince leaders of industry that this is investment to their benefit.
Yeah, I think there are three things. One is that, yes, it costs money, but we're not talking huge amounts. The second is it really matters if people understand the science, the processes they're dealing with. It actually makes a difference in dollar terms to how effectively they're extracting resources. And number three is that it is achievable. It's not too hard. You know, it's not a huge barrier that we'll never ever be able to overcome. It doesn't cost an enormous amount of money to put a few more staff into undergraduate programs, to you know, have more money available for postgraduate research and programs, and then the sort of on-the-job training that people need. And also for companies to understand that need as well, so that they're also encouraging and nurturing the development within their own organisations. Okay.
Thanks very much. That's all we've got time for today, but if you could all join me to thank Diana once again. Please feel free to stick around for some tea or coffee. I'm not sure if there's any biscuits out today, but and catch up with Diana if you've got any other questions still lingering.